Hey everyone, today we're taking a look at the ATI Radeon HD 4890, and we're going to see how well it does in 2017. The card we're looking at today is actually a card I've owned for many years. I let a friend borrow it quite a while ago, and I've recently got it back, so I'm going to be cleaning it up, reapplying some thermal paste, and putting it through the paces. Now this card really wasn't gamed on too much, it actually sat idle most of the time, so I went ahead and took the shroud off and looked at the heatsink, and there was quite a bit of dust and gunk in the copper heatsink. So here's some before and after footage of the card. Before we jump into the benchmarks, let's take a look at some of the specifications of the card. The card was released back in April of 2009. It has 800 stream processors, 40 texture units, 16 ROPs, a core clock of 850 MHz, a memory clock of 975 MHz with a double data rate of 3900 MHz, a bus width of 256-bit. It had a 1 GB GDDR5 frame buffer, and a total transistor count of 959 million transistors. It was built on a 55 nanometer process, and essentially it was just an overclocked HD 4870. However, it did have 3 million more transistors due to some improvements made to the ASIC. Now that the card's looking all purty, it's time to do some game testing. Alright, the first game we're taking a look at today is Overwatch. Now, first off, the 4890 is very lucky that it can play Overwatch because the minimum DirectX version that you need to play the game is 10.1. And comparable NVIDIA cards would be the GTX 275, 280, 260, and all those cards are DirectX 10 only, so they cannot play Overwatch. So the 4890 can, which is great. So we're going to go ahead and change the settings to 1080p. We're going to do a 100% resolution scale with pretty much every other setting set to low. And surprisingly enough, this game runs pretty well. We saw an average frame rate of 48 with a minimum frame rate of 34. However, if we were to change the resolution scaling down to 75%, frame rates on average would be over 60. The next game we're going to take a look at is Rust. It's a very popular multiplayer game. And unfortunately, this game would really only run at playable frame rates at 720p in DirectX 9 mode. We did also have to use the potato settings as well. It did stutter quite a bit, really wasn't a great experience. On average, we saw a frame rate of 45 with a minimum of 15. Next up is GTA 5, and we changed the resolution to 1080p. All the settings were set to normal/low, and we played the game for quite a while. I will say the overall experience was just okay. We did see a lot of lag/stutter. There was some frequent pausing. That's primarily the reason for the low minimums on this game. But overall, with these settings, we saw an average frame rate of 46 with a minimum of 19. The next game we tested was Metro Last Light Redux. All the settings were set to low, and we went ahead and played and noticed that the game ran really well. Most inside areas ran in the 60s and up. The second we stepped outside, frame rate did plummet a little bit, but overall the experience was really good. Our average frame rate was 62, and our minimum frame rate was 37. Payday 2 was the next game we tested, and we set the majority of the settings to medium at 1080p. The overall experience was very good. However, if we wanted higher frame rates, we could drop the settings even lower. We did average a frame rate of 51 with a minimum of 41, a very playable experience. The next game up is Tomb Raider, and here we set the resolution to 1080p with the normal preset. Went ahead and played the game for quite a while, and noticed the frame rate was pretty good. We saw an average frame rate of 45 with a minimum of 33. We could dial down the settings down to the lowest if we wanted to, but the textures and the game itself just does not look very good. I myself would probably enable VSync at 30 frames per second and enjoy the game that way. Next up is Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen. This isn't really a new game, but it's a really fun game and a game that can be played on DX9 and 10 cards. With a mixture of settings at medium and low at 1080p, we saw really playable results. We averaged a frame rate of 58 with a minimum of 34, and we could tweak those settings down a little bit further to get a frame rate that averaged well over 60. Subnautica is the next game we tested, and we set the resolution to 1080p with everything set to low. And the game really wasn't a playable experience. There was a lot of stutter, a lot of pausing, and a lot of pop-in. Overall, we did average a frame rate of 41, but our minimums were 9, really low. Wasn't a very fun experience. The second to last game we tested was the original Dishonored. Resolution was set to 1080p, and the majority of the settings were set to high. We did disable AA for a more playable experience. We did see an average frame rate of 71 with a minimum of 38. Overall, the experience was very good playing Dishonored. And the last game we tested was Rocket League, one of my personal favorites. We had everything set to high quality with FXAA on low, and the game ran as expected, ran really well. We saw an average frame rate of 64 with a minimum of 51. And that wraps up our game testing. If you all are interested in seeing the specifications of the PC I ran these tests on, please check the description. I also want to make a note that there is no Windows 10 driver for the 4890, so I did have to revert to the Windows 8 driver as this card is in legacy support. Didn't really see any issues with GPU utilization, as the vast majority of games it was approaching 99%. There was a couple that it did sporadically go up and down, but wasn't really that big of an issue. Now, a look back on a video card wouldn't be complete without any overclocking. Like I do with most overcards when overclock, I use MSI's Afterburner and Unigine Heaven. Now, this card actually came with a 25 MHz overclock from the factory to 875. When overclocking this card, I thought it was pretty much the easiest card to overclock in the world. This is what I did to the sliders. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Ran Unigine Heaven for another 15-20 minutes. Everything appeared to be stable. So when I went into the Tomb Raider benchmark and started running it, this is what happened. You'll see some triangles, black triangles pop up, usually a sign of the core not having enough voltage or being too high. And then all of a sudden, bam, got hit with a memory issue. So I decided to back it back down and see what it could do. Since Tomb Raider wasn't stable, I definitely dropped the core down a little bit, down to 985. I also dropped the memory down to 2300. After running the test a couple of times, it did appear stable. And we still got decent overclocking results. Now, in order to test the frame rates, I used the original Tomb Raider's benchmark for a more consistent comparison. With the original clock speeds, we saw an average frame rate of 53.4. With the overclock applied, we saw the average frame rate jump to 60.5, so it's a decent bump in performance. Well, that's pretty much our look at the 4890 in 2017. Obviously, I can't run any 2017 titles or AAA titles because they're all DirectX 11 and up. If you're wondering why I didn't run CSGO, Dota 2, League of Legends, Team Fortress 2, well, they all run great. No problems on this card whatsoever, at pretty high settings. If any of you have any questions about the card or my testing or anything else, feel free to leave it in the comments, and thanks for checking out the video. Bye.